you're also not getting the gem anywhere else. David, what do we got?
Yeah, well, so basically, we're seeing a big shift in a major conversation. There's been a reopening that's been happening in a very bizarre, anarchic way all across the country. But as these next few months go on, we're going to start to see this play out to be more of a dynamic for people across the economic spectrum across the country. And I really wanted to talk about basically like choice and the labor relations that go into choices over your own safety. And specifically, I want to focus on essential employees, which the EPI estimates that there are around 55 million people who have been deemed essential during this period of time. And it's hard to get full information on these groups, but like the EPI is estimating that around half of the essential industries have a median hourly wage that is less than the non-essential workforce's median hourly wage. So the people who basically have been asked to go forward and put their lives at the risk and the lives of their family and their communities and people around them, they're getting significantly less amounts of money than people who are working in these other industries. So right now, we're starting to see what the cost of that is. And we've been seeing that for a long time. Last week, we talked about what's happening with all the poultry workers in this country who have been, severely exposed to this virus. But I wanted to talk sort of about, move away from like the numbers per se and a little bit more about how people are sort of feeling about the work that they're being asked to do. So the National Employment Law Project, they asked workers, and this information was broken down by income, workers who have been deemed essential. They asked them, have you gone to work outside your home during this pandemic, even though you thought it might be seriously risking your health or a family member's health? And for workers who are making less than $30,000 a year, 63% of them said yes. For workers in between the 30,000 and the 75,000 range, it was around 58%. And for those above the 75,000 range, it was 39%. So, the fact is that anybody who's going out and working under these conditions is, there are significant amounts of the communities that are feeling unsafe, but you can see how much greater that is on the share, of workers who are making significantly less. And, it gets even worse when you realize that, a significant amount of workers aren't getting any hazard pay. So out of those respondents to that survey, only around 30% of them said that they are getting, who are working outside their home, reported that they were getting extra hazard pay. So that's 70% of, the workers who have been basically facing this brunt of coronavirus, who haven't been getting any extra pay. And, there's the first dynamic, which is that like low wage workers have less access to healthcare because they don't have insurance or their insurance is bad. And two, how these things start to trickle out. So, people with lower incomes, they tend to live, a decent amount of them live in larger households. They tend to rely more on, their community. So the risk of, spreading the virus around your community is very large. And it's been very frightening to see as more and more people have basically been pushed into, the workforce against their will for the most part, by these states that have forced them in, into work, that we're starting to see the spread. So I'm just going to pull this tweet right here from Christian Stefani. It says that basically in Dallas, and Texas has been really getting hit hard over the past few weeks since they reopened foolishly. I mean, the governor of Texas, Abbott, just said that he finds the increase to be unacceptable, even though he's the one who's put in these ridiculous measures in the first place. So anyways, in Dallas, 80% of the new cases are frontline essential workers. And, this isn't an isolated event. I know across Texas right now, we're seeing an alarming rate of infections around people who are childcare workers and basically people who've been forced, back into work because other people are being forced into work, right? So now you have a larger, need and stress on, childcare, facilities in the state, and that's going on everywhere. So like the reality is that, these low wage essential workers are they're already being exploited, right? the fact that they're being paid less, even before this pandemic, that they were being paid less than what was deemed non-essential work, should tell you, a great lesson about capitalism is that the people who are the most critical to the system are the ones who are the most exploited, and that's because capitalism is a system that preys upon exploiting people and making them so desperate. The reality that so many people who are making less than $30,000 a year said that they had to work even though that they really felt that they were putting themselves or their families at risk shows a fundamental reality of capitalism. Capitalism is an authoritarian system that does not allow people to have the freedom of choice over their own bodies and over their own, community, because we are put into a situation where if you're not going into work, if you're not going in to be exploited by the market constantly, then you don't eat, you don't have a roof over your head, all these kind of things. And look, the reality is we're dealing with this pandemic and there's work that needs to be done. We're not denying that reality. But the fact is that the workers, these frontline workers who are so exposed to the virus, are one, they're dealing with employers who for the most part have been shown that they don't really care about their employees. They have not put in the kind of protections on the workplace that workers need to prevent the spread of the virus. You see a lot of employers being very timid, for example, when you have these lunatics running around in your store refusing to wear masks. They're not standing up for their employees, right? That's a power dynamic, right? There's a moral question there. Like if you're a small business owner and you're not taking care of your employees, yes, that's a moral question, but it's fundamentally a power dynamic that working people aren't given the freedom in this country to demand and create safe environments to work during this pandemic. That fundamentally needs to change. And as we see other areas of the economy start to open up in the next few weeks, more and more people are going to experience this really callous relationship between the employer and the employee, when capitalists are basically going to make the decision that it's not very profitable to put in the kind of protections that workers need to prevent the spread of the virus. You're going to start to see that dynamic play out more and more. So going forward, I mean, like Tyson Chicken was a great example, right? It's like all these workers were demanding, like, if we just slowed down production a little bit, we could still meet, the demand for meat in the society. But Tyson was refusing to even cut down a little bit on production. Because why? Because their only goal is to profit as much as possible. So these frontline essential workers, they need much more than just our praise. They actually need like a genuine solidarity, and a solidarity that I hope more and more people start to become aware of, that all of us, the vast majority of the population in this country, are in the same relationship when it comes to our relationship between the bosses and the workers. And bosses all across this society are being able to make almost unilaterally decisions that affect massive amounts of people, massive, huge communities. They're making these decisions based on their own personal motivation to profit as much as possible. And that's no way to run a society. We're seeing its failures, specifically in the United States, when it comes to like our horrible hyper-capitalist system that really has completely failed at stopping this virus from spreading in the first place. And we're going to see it continue to get worse until there starts to be a pushback from the workers who are basically being sacrificed at the altar of like American profit. I just really wanted to hit that right now, because it's starting to get very worrying for a lot of people that I've been talking to, people who already have been essential workers, a lot of people who've been working in the food service industry. There really is such a lack of care from their employers. Lack of communication and a lack of democratic decision-making. I think the framing of power is really important. That it is not right that a few people in the society are able to make these decisions that negatively affect so many people. And we need to be fighting back as much as possible against it, because it's not going to get better until we change that relationship.
Absolutely.
You just watched a Michael Brooks show video. Subscribe to get them all. Why wouldn't you? Don't be foolish. Click subscribe below and become a patron as well. Patreon.com/TMBS. Thanks, everybody.